Coming up next.
They tend not to, thankfully, get into this career for the money. They get in it because they're really interested in the topic. And then if you can find a way to make sure that the thing that you're looking at is interesting and has some benefit for society, then I think that'll help sustain you.
The Job Talk podcast shares stories from people who are passionate and love what they do in their careers. Through conversation, we explore their careers, past work experiences, and the education that got them to where they are now. We are putting together a Career Crisis Ultimate interview series. We are asking experts to give their best advice and guidance around work anxiety, career pressures, career goal setting, and ultimately, career transformation. To learn more about this special interview series and get notified when it's available, please visit our webpage at thejobtalk.com/help.
Today's guest is Chris Lonsdale. Here's our Job Talk with the Senior Academic Administrator. Full disclosure for our listeners, Chris. You and I are childhood friends. We grew up in a small town in British Columbia, Canada, and you're now down in Sydney, Australia. Did you always know that you were going to move away from Canada and live somewhere else?
No, absolutely not. No. But I think probably the scene was set when my parents took us to live in Germany for 3 years when I was 10. And we traveled pretty much every long weekend and holiday all around Europe, staying in campgrounds and going to what we referred to as the ABCs, another bloody cathedral, because my dad was a bit of a history buff and loved to see all those things. So no, he's more than a history buff. He's a total history fanatic. But yeah, I think it probably set the scene for living overseas after doing that at a young age. Yeah.
Your PhD is in sports psychology. Why did you ultimately move away from that?
So my original training was in sports psychology. Yeah. And I think probably like lots of people in their mid-20s, I thought that competitive sport was sort of the most important thing. And so I started a PhD at the University of Otago doing sports psychology. And sort of interestingly enough, by the end of my PhD, I probably wasn't so enamored with high performance sport by the end of that. And over probably the next few years after that, I started to transition away from competitive sport. So I sort of dabbled for a period of 5 years doing work for various organizations, as well as having an academic career post at a university. But yeah, I think I sort of realized fairly early on that I didn't want to spend my life running around with elite sports people. I wanted to do something that had a bit more of a public focus. So I started doing more in terms of public health. So looking more at behavior change and how to help people have healthier lifestyles, that kind of thing.
Okay. So what is your job title now?
Well, that's changed quite recently. So about 6 months ago, I moved into a full-time management role at the university. So my academic duties in terms of research, teaching, and service to the community are fairly limited now. And so now I'm completely a manager. The academic bureaucracy is sort of the scourge of the earth, I've often said, and now I'm part of it. So yeah, okay. It's good fun.
Yeah, we'll dig into your position and your day-to-day a little bit later. What was your first post-secondary experience?
So I guess it would have been early September 1993, a long time ago now. Loaded up a very rusty beige Volkswagen of some description, I think, with our mutual friend Christian Road, and drove down to Victoria in British Columbia and went to UVIC. So I did my undergraduate degree at UVIC and went on to do a master's there as well.
And a master's. How did you enjoy your time at the University of Victoria?
Well, I was there quite a while because I think the first couple of years I sort of wandered around from different major to major. I thought I was going to go and do some sort of pre-medical degree in some kind of science. And my first semester or first year, I thought my biology lecturer was probably one of the more boring people on earth, and decided, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. And it's a funny thing about being a doctor, you need to do biology. So I ended up sort of switching around a few different degrees. I started doing a math degree for a little while, and was going to do education, and then ended up doing a degree in psychology. So yeah, I finished my bachelor's in psychology, and then went on and did that master's in sports psych. And I loved Victoria. It was great. I mean, I was there for about 7 years through those two degrees, and made great friends. Played a lot of rugby while I was at the university, and managed to squeeze in some schoolwork as well. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah. How was you played rugby? That was your sport when you were at the University of Victoria. What is it like being a athlete and taking a pretty heavy course load?
Yeah, I wouldn't really know, because I didn't really take a very heavy course load until the last year, and I decided I really wanted to finish. And I realized that I was going to have to take, I think it was like 7 classes one semester, and you're actually not allowed to take 7 classes. So I actually had to, I think it was apply to the provost or one of the people who's in a job that I'm in now, for special permission to take extra classes, because for my first 2 or 3 years at the university, I mucked about so much and switched and swapped and spent too much time at the pub. So yeah, but I think in the last sort of year and a half, I really did do a lot of schoolwork and a lot of sport, and had a job, bartending and waiting at a restaurant. So yeah, it was good. I mean, it was fun. I mean, I think when you're that age, you don't really think about it. You just sort of do lots of different things and enjoy all of it, and it's all just good fun.
You leave the University of Victoria, and you mentioned you had your PhD in sports psychology. Is that correct?
Yeah. So that was in New Zealand. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So the PhD came when you went to New Zealand, and that was the university.
Of Otago. Yeah. So I did a bachelor's and a master's at UVIC, and then had a bit of time off, probably a year, maybe a little bit more, kind of mucking about in Vancouver doing various different jobs. And then went off to New Zealand to do my PhD, and kept playing rugby down there. And like many, I don't know, 23, 24-year-olds, whatever I was at the time, I really wasn't choosing my career path for all sort of probably the smartest reasons. I largely chose that university because I knew somebody there, and because I wanted to keep playing rugby. And New Zealand has lots of rugby, so that was about as smart as I thought about it.
And it gets you down to New Zealand, beautiful country.
Yeah.
So this is a 20 to 40 minute podcast. We could probably go on for hours if we went day by day what happened in your life after leaving the University of Victoria. But how did you end up in Australia?
It was a pretty circuitous path to get here. Yeah. I finished my PhD, and then, like a lot of academics, you sort of just kind of put your CV out there to the world. I mean, and you have to be, you can't be particularly choosy. You might have to just go and live somewhere that you might not want to be. Now, I actually, funnily enough, I had 2 job offers coming out of my PhD, and one was where you are in Edmonton, and one was in Hong Kong. And again, probably not making the smartest career decision, but probably making the better life decision. I ended up going for the one in Hong Kong. The one at the University of Alberta in Edmonton was probably a better job in terms of advancing my career, but yeah, living in Hong Kong, and my partner at the time wouldn't have been able to get a visa for Canada anyway. So look, it was all just kind of came together, and ended up going to Hong Kong. And then I went to Ireland, and arrived the month that the global financial crisis happened. And within 2 years, it was pretty clear that you weren't going to have a lot of job security in Ireland. And so sat down with a map and said, right, first good job that comes up on the west coast of Canada or the east coast of Australia, let's go. And the job in Sydney came up and we went. So that's how we ended up in Australia.
Well, it's debatable lifestyle choice between Edmonton or Hong Kong, but that's an entirely different conversation. Sure. Okay, let's talk about your position right now. Where are you working and what do you do in your day-to-day?
Yeah, so I'm at the Australian Catholic University in Sydney. So we have campuses all across sort of the eastern seaboard of Australia. And so I'm the Deputy Provost. So what that means is the Provost is kind of in charge of the 4 faculties that we have across the university. And I'm essentially her right-hand man. So, I mean, I don't teach a lot anymore. I do some research, but mostly it's about trying to keep the organization running and going on a strategic path. I mean, it doesn't sound particularly exciting, but I do a lot of work on policy. So, we have things like, how and when people get promoted, and how we allocate their workloads of what they're doing kind of in their day-to-day. So we have, somewhere around 1,000 academics. So setting the policy to make sure that, we've got people doing what they need to be doing and making sure that they sort of understand what success looks like for the organization and then feel confident and enthusiastic about achieving those things. And we do a lot of that through sort of policy and procedures to sort of make that happen. So, yeah, it's a lot of, you'd think policy would be sort of like just sitting down at your keyboard and writing something, but that's actually sort of the very end part. The earlier part is all about, understanding the context and having a lot of consultation, really trying to listen to what people are saying. So what's hard for them, what they want. So yeah, it's just a lot of listening and trying to sort of think creatively about, the problem at hand. So a lot of analytical skills. So, there's what's the problem here and, how can we make that happen in a way that's not going to cost the organization more, but it's more effective for people. So it's interesting work actually. Yeah. I've only been at this about 6 months. So in a year and a half, maybe I'll have a better sense of whether I really like it or if I like it right now just because it's new. But yeah, at the moment I'm really enjoying it.
Chris, what do you enjoy most about your career right now?
Universities are sort of at an interesting point right now, especially all over the world, but in Australia especially, in that the job of an academic is really changing. There's not just because of the pandemic. There's a lot of sort of shift to make sure that your work is really relevant for the country, for society, and so the jobs are really changing. Obviously, information technology has had a massive influence on that as well. The way that the pandemic and online learning and everything has changed things. So academics are definitely feeling pretty challenged right now. So when you can sort of listen to what they're saying and then do something about it, not for the individual, but for the whole university, and then see a change in that's pretty gratifying. So we've had a problem at this university that the people don't apply for promotion very often. They and I suppose on the one hand, from an economic point of view, you might think that's a good thing because it doesn't cost the university more money because you have to pay them more. But we want people to progress at the university. We want them to have a career here. We want them to succeed, and we want them to sort of to feel good and do good work. So we have a rate of people applying for promotion that's much lower than other universities in Australia. So in the last year or so, we've been going through this process to revamp our promotions policy, and a lot of that's involved consultation with the academics. And at the end of that, we've doubled the number of applications that we got this year. And anecdotally, people are telling us it's because they have more confidence in the process now. So yeah, it's something like that. I mean, it just if you can help people feel better about their work and it makes a difference to their day-to-day life and to their career trajectory, then yeah, that feels pretty good.
Yeah. What are some obvious challenges in your role that you face every day?
People probably don't think about it, but universities are really large organizations. I mean, even a modest sized university would have like $500 million of revenue in a year. And so because of that, they're pretty large organizations. So that comes with a lot of bureaucracy potentially. And even if you don't have a lot of bureaucracy, you've got a lot of interests from different parts of the university. And so trying to coordinate something across the whole institution is pretty challenging. I mean, when you've got more than 2,000 employees all told across the university, about half of them are academics, trying to get something, that seems like it should be reasonably straightforward done can be pretty challenging because you get a lot of different interests across and people have different goals. So yeah, they see the world pretty differently. So yeah, it's coordination is probably the biggest challenge.
What kind of advice could you give somebody that would like to follow your career path and end up in a position like yours?
The people who do well in academia are curious and they follow things that really interest them. They tend not to, thankfully, get into this career for the money. They get in it because they're really interested in the topic. And the best ones, I think, follow that curiosity and have an innate or learned appreciation for passing on that passion for something to other people, so to their students. So I think it has to start with that sort of intrinsic interest in something that you think is worth looking at. And then if you can find a way to make sure that the thing that you're looking at is interesting and has some benefit for society, then I think that'll help sustain you. So that's sort of how to be in academia. And then if you wanted to be in management in academia, I probably have to think about that one a little bit more. I'm not sure. I think probably the biggest thing you could do is really develop your listening skills and your negotiating skills and your influencing skills. You're not going to do very well at a university or probably at any sort of managerial kind of a role or management role if you're constantly having to rely on sort of your position of authority to get something done. And that's something I've really tried to make sure that I'm trying to convince people, show people a better way, think about creative ways, sort of try and empathize with their situations to really try and understand what's hard for them, what they're trying to achieve, and then come up with a solution that works for them so that they get on board and they want to help you drive the change. So anything you can be doing in your career to be learning those kinds of skills would probably be pretty useful. But as I said, I'm pretty new to the management thing, so I wouldn't suggest I've got it all figured out. But that's what I'm shooting towards anyway.
What surprises have you experienced throughout your career? And I'm wondering if maybe one of the surprises is you didn't continue a career based right on psychology or sports psychology.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think if you'd asked sort of 23-year-old me if I'd be doing this, maybe the management thing, actually, I think I probably wouldn't have been that surprised. I mean, I remember really early on, even as a PhD student, talking to the dean of our faculty and sort of thinking that would be pretty interesting. But yeah, I probably would have been a little bit surprised, I think. If you'd asked high school me, I would have been really surprised because I was pretty certain I was going to end up in medicine. And yeah, just didn't pursue that in the end. So yeah, the track that I've taken, the other things that have surprised me, look, I mean, if I think about what academia and universities were like when I started, I mean, the internet wasn't even a thing. So, I mean, the rate of which we can create knowledge and transfer knowledge across the world, I mean, that's just incredible. I mean, we had card catalogs when I started university,
Yeah.
microfiche, that kind of thing. I mean, like that's clearly the most surprising thing. I mean, now, I mean, I remember the very first, and actually it was the only one I ever did, but the very first article I ever published, like I printed it and sent it in the mail. And that's just unfathomable now. You just the exchange of ideas is so fast, and the opportunity to collaborate with somebody that you've never met on the other side of the world. I mean, it happens all the time. You just email somebody out of the blue and say, "Hey, I'm interested in this. Would you be interested in looking at that with me?" And a lot of the times they say yes. And just I couldn't even imagine that when I started my career. So yeah, that's probably the most surprising thing, but that's the same for so many industries, I'm sure.
Yeah. What advice could you give yourself? And let's say time travel existed and you're hopping on a plane, flying to New Zealand. What do you think you would say to yourself as you started that literal journey?
Look, I probably, when I was getting started there, I probably would have tried to reach out to sort of more disciplines across the university earlier. So I probably got a little bit sort of narrow and focused. And that happens a lot with a PhD. You're so focused on one tiny little sliver of the universe, that probably you can lose a bit of the context. So, I probably should have been talking more to, people over in public health and education in different parts of the university. And then I did a reasonable job of sort of reaching out to working with elite sporting organizations to while I was doing my PhD. So that was good, but yeah, probably would have diversified a little earlier. Might have set me up for sort of what I was going to do later on, but instead I just kind of did that later on and learned on the hop kind of thing.
How do you like living in Australia?
It's good. I mean, it's been a bit rough this year. We've had floods and I mean, we've had fires the year before, and obviously COVID's hit everybody. But no, it's great. I mean, Sydney's a pretty great city to live in. Pretty fortunate to live near the beach, and get to walk down there with the dog every morning, which is pretty nice. I mean, I like to be outside a lot, riding my bike and playing golf and doing that kind of thing, and you can do that pretty much year round here, which is nice. So it's good. I enjoy it. Absolutely. I mean, it's a long way from everywhere else, it feels like sometimes, but that's okay. You can get on a plane, or you could, at least until the pandemic came.
Oh, I'm going to ask you a little bit about the pandemic. What was it like down in Australia going through the pandemic? Because I have a few thoughts on what it was like living in Canada, but how did Australia handle it?
Well, it was pretty different, I think, than a lot of other places. I mean, they closed the borders pretty early, and they were pretty draconian about how they handled that. I mean, there were a lot of people, stuck on one side of that border or the other, with family on the other, and not just sort of adult parents and things like that. It was, literally your kids were on the other side of the border, and because of some issue you couldn't get back.
Wow.
And as Australians, and I am an Australian now, we literally weren't allowed to leave. Like you just were not allowed to travel overseas unless you had special permission. It felt a little odd actually, and there was a lot of questions raised about sort of the legality of that kind of thing. So yeah, we locked down pretty hard and pretty early. I think we did a pretty reasonable job of adhering to public health orders, and they were orders. They weren't guidelines; they were orders.
Yeah.
And I think that was a good thing in a lot of ways. I mean, I think the at the other end we looked pretty good. I think there were times when the government could have done it in a sort of explaining things a little more, and but that's pretty hard. Communication's hard during the pandemic. But we did well, and in terms of the sort of death rate, I mean, we've had 10,000 people die as a rate. That's pretty good compared to a lot of other countries. So yeah, it's been hard for everybody, but I think Australia's probably weathered it a little better than most countries. That's my sense anyway.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to all the interesting documentaries that are going to come out on the pandemic, and actually the Trump presidency. I'm looking forward to all of the behind the scenes documentaries on that.
Yeah, I remember when the pandemic started, and I was listening to this guy. I think it was Harvard public health epidemiologist, and it was right when it started, and he was saying, look, this is going to be a big thing, and it's probably the effects are going to be about 5 years. And I remember like talking to a few people about that, and just people were just incredulous, like that. No way, 5 years, come on. Well, it's looking pretty bang on at this point, really. I mean, we're nowhere close to being back to normal. I mean, we're now having another spike here, and it's changed everything. It really has.
It has changed everything, and I'm most concerned about. I've got younger kids. Well, they're getting older now, but it was hard psychologically on them for sure. Mm. Well, Chris,
my son thought it was great. He loved homeschool. He thought it was great. He could bang out his schoolwork in 2 hours and then call his friends and play Fortnite. So he thought that was great.
Sorry, and how old is he?
He's 11. Yeah, so he loves online games.
I was watching my 10-year-old son at the time. He was walking around with a Chromebook, and he was often shirtless, so his camera was off, and I would see him in the backyard in his fort. He'd be in the kitchen, he'd be downstairs. So I don't know how much education he got over those 2 years, but we'll cross that road some other time. Chris, I just want to say you've forged out a great career in that it's taken you to beautiful places all over the world. And you clearly are doing something that you love to do. So congratulations on the career and the choices that you've made, because not everyone makes choices and lands in a job that they truly love. So congratulations on that. And
thanks, Kim.
I just want to thank you for joining us today and sharing some of your stories.
My pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to the Job Talk podcast. For more information, please visit us at thejobtalk.com. Our podcast music was created by our friend Mike Malone in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.